Welcome to Livermore and the third annual Livermore Innovation Fair. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge all our sponsors, TopCon, Lamb Research, Lawrence Livermore Lab, Sandia, ThoughtSpot, and many other donors. It's just because of those people we are able to bring this wonderful event to our community. My name is Kiran Galeria, and I am the Education Program Manager here at Livermore Valley Performing Arts Center. The mission of Livermore Valley Performing Arts Center is to provide a space where all students in the Tri-Valley region can engage and grow in the arts. Every year, we connect to cover 30,000 students and community members through our education program, which focus on 3 areas: learning, enrichment, and growth. I enjoy the passion and spark it brings to the eye of kid that we impact. We hope to change their lives for the better as they become more immersed into the world of science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Dr. Manu Prakash is a bioengineer who has improved the world by creating small yet amazing feats. Dr. Manu Prakash has allowed millions of people around the globe to live stronger and healthier life. Dr. Manu Prakash is an associate professor in the Department of Bioengineering at Stanford, a recipient of MacArthur Genius Award 2016. Dr. Prakash is also a member of Biophysics program in the School of Medicine and in the Center of Innovation in Global Health, a faculty fellow of Stanford ChemH, and an affiliated member of Woods Institute for the Environment. He completed his doctorate at Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 2008 and was a junior fellow of Harvard Society of Fellows for 3 years before arriving at Stanford. Dr. Prakash also holds numerous patents, and his research has been published in various scientific journals. His extensive research has been driven by a curiosity about the diversity of life from our planet, and empathy for problems in resource-poor setting, and a passion for sharing a joy of science. So please welcome Dr. Manu Prakash.
Can you hear me at the back? Yeah? There are lots of open spots, so if you want to come all the way up here, because I have some things to show and tell, and you'll get a better view. But if you want, you can also sit at the back. I used to sit at the back in school, but it doesn't hurt to sit at the back. Thank you so much for having me. I am absolutely delighted. You could all be enjoying the sunny weather outside, but you're in here in this dark room listening to me, so thank you so much. This will be very informal. I have nothing very formal prepared, but at that same time, if you want to interrupt me anytime, you have questions along the way, and then at the end of the time, I'll have a few demos, so we might either do them here or do them outside. So I'm a faculty at Stanford, and I think quite a lot about something that I'll talk about today. I call it frugal science. And we will discuss that word from many different contexts. How many of you have heard of that word before? I'm just curious. Wow, that's fantastic. So you all have a notion of what I might be talking about. I don't do this work alone. So this is a picture of my lab. Most people look at this and then say I'm a scatterbrained, which is true. But there is a method to this madness, and since I know I won't finish my slide deck, I want to acknowledge the people. The work is not done by cartoons, but by real people. And these are the remarkable students that I get a chance to work with at Stanford. And I'll tell you several stories along the way, and one of the things that ends up happening is I'm always amazed that some organizations and people also pay for us to have fun, and so many of those are listed there. Okay, so since I said this is going to be informal, I'm actually going to check something that I wanted to do, which, okay, no, I don't have that slide. I think, we live in a very interesting world. you have a notion of thinking about information, any of you could pull out your phones right now and search for anything that you were looking for. But science as a juxtaposition is not just about information, it's also about experiences. And growing up over the years, I grew up in India and then moved to graduate school here, and then when I talk to people around the world, the experience of science is still very expensive. And this is why we're all here, both gathering and celebrating science. But why is it that the experience of science is not accessible to everyone? And the way that I think about this in the context of cost and performance. So if you don't remember anything from this talk, the only thing I want you to remember is it turns out everything that you think about, you can boil that down as a technology or a tool in the context of cost and performance. If you could make leaps and jumps in cost, you could deliver a tool out in the middle of where it has never been available before, which is what we were going to try to do. So I'll start with a little bit of background to this problem, which is this is a picture that I took in Ghana. Now, this happens to be a bus stop, but it's also a hospital. If you look at the statistics around the world, why do we care about cost per se? 7 billion people on this planet, roughly 1 billion still live with no access to roads, infrastructure, running water, and so hence no real healthcare or electricity or education systems. And this happens to be a malaria clinic right now, and we'll talk a lot about malaria because we work on that. And what you're seeing there are kids that have arrived that are waiting for a doctor that might arrive in a bus. The doctor arrives once a week, and this is the healthcare system that you're dealing with. How do you change that? How do you really make changes more broadly? One of the interesting things about this is you can look around the world and do these analyses everywhere. It's very clear that we are not providing the kind of healthcare that every human being deserves on this planet as broadly as we would like to. So as healthcare keeps getting more and more expensive, this story keeps getting far more complicated. To the right there is actually a picture of one of our field sites in Madagascar where we work. And we just got off the road, and we're going to now walk for the next 12 hours to get to the actual village that we work in. And so you can imagine, and the first sets of slides I know are going to be, I want you to truly think and broadly understand the sets of problems. If you are sick, you are walking 12 hours to actually get to any healthcare, which is not viable in any way or form. And this is why infectious diseases still actually take a huge toll on human lives. Now, I started working in healthcare, and ironically, it became very obvious that education is a dramatic challenge as well. And this is another picture that I took that happens to be a school, and a roof doesn't really make a school. And again, if we care about all the problems that we are leaving for the next generation, so I know there are lots of kids in this room, and I have to be honest with all the kids here. We're leaving a lot of problems for you guys, which you will have to tackle, and unfortunately, we're not leaving enough behind in terms of the sets of solutions. And if you talk about, there's roughly around 2 billion kids on this planet, so you guys are a pretty strong and a growing population. But roughly 1 billion of kids on this planet are also in places where there are very little resources. And again, I think sometimes we break that chatter where the sets of resources don't matter, but in the end, from a context of science, it truly does matter if you are exposed to science early on. So these are massive challenges. Millions of people are working on these, but I want you to remember these challenges because these are not easy problems. Here's the tough one. You might be thinking about, oh, these are faraway places, I am doing well. We're not doing so well, unfortunately. I don't know if you've all been reading the whole vaccine movement, the anti-vaccine movement of what's actually happening, where our public trust in science is deteriorating as well. And this doesn't just happen around here, it happens around the world, and it's primarily because people really have not ever experienced the process of science as well. So we're going to try to take a few of these challenges and ask ourselves, what can we do about it? Similarly, if I was to pull out, if you were to think of, I don't know if any of you saw these sets of statistics that just came out. How many of you heard of the sixth extinction? A few of you. So again, sad report, we are in the middle of the sixth extinction. In the history of our planet, this is one of the, I mean, it's sixth in series, but a very large extinction event. And you know, one analogy that it was documented is for the last 30 years of data in Europe has lost 70% of its insect biodiversity. And we actually don't know what's causing that. So it's a fascinating challenge. We live on this planet, and it's even hard to figure out why many of these things are happening. And again, this is something that all of you have probably heard before, is much of the plastic that we're using is ending up in the ocean. And again, another set of challenges where we really don't have any solution for a problem like this. So I want you to sort of put your thinking hats on. By the end of this 1 hour, you know, I would have listed many problems and I would have listed a set of approaches, but in the end, it needs to be all of us engaged and thinking about these broader challenges. Some of them are healthcare, some of them are education, some of them are really planetary health, and we will try to juxtapose how we might actually together think about this. Okay, so here's the grand challenge I want you to take away. How do we measure what's happening on our planet, whether that's happening in the context of health, whether that's happening in the context of education or the environment? Whatever you do and think about, you really have to do it at a planetary scale if you care about that being broadly accessible, because people are spread across the planet, and it's a beautiful planet and we only got one, so we have to think about these sets of things in a very broad scale. And then the question is, has that ever been done before? Have communities come together very broadly to make changes and to do the kinds of things that the current knowledge of science couldn't tackle? And there happens to be one example that I really like. So can anybody remind me, what is that object on the left, the little piece of steel ball that you're seeing? Yes? Fantastic. It is amazing, the fact that you remember, or because, you know, in the context of the people who grew up in the era, and I'm not one of them, this was an object that captured people's fascination. But at the time the Russians launched Sputnik, neither the United States or anybody else in the world actually had any technology to track a satellite. So I could have just gone and said, hey, I launched a satellite, and nobody could verify that. Now, that's very interesting because many of the people thought that it was a hoax from the Reds. And literally, you know, Red's launch dog in space would be the front cover of. This got people thinking beforehand because they were aware that satellites are being built, and the head of the Smithsonian started a program. Anybody has heard of Operation Moonwatch? So that's phenomenal, and one of the contexts is this happens to be the oldest and the longest running citizen science program in the world. It started in astronomy, where literally people around the world were shipped telescopes and they pointed it to the sky and they were told to look at a patch of a sky. And now you see this is all around the world. I love the title there. It says, Mrs. Lloyd, housewife volunteer, sought Sputnik 2. And you know, it's fascinating because it's an object in the sky that humans have put. Why would you not be fascinated by that? But the fact that as an experience, you could read it in the newspaper or you could point your telescope and look at it. So the only thing that I'm going to talk about today is how do you directly experience science and why does that matter? The reason it mattered here is because the Smithsonian figured out a program to use volunteers around the world to track, and a gentleman in Iowa was the very first person to spot Sputnik. He telephoned the head of the marshals, and you know, all the telescopes, the big guns got pointed to the sky at that spot, and that's how we actually discovered that Sputnik is for real. And for the next 30 years, this was the largest tracking program for satellites around the world before we had robotic telescopes. Literally, it was an object that you could make for $10. All the instructions were posted on the equivalent of Radio Shack. And I looked on eBay, and there are other telescopes still available that pretend to be Operation Moonwatch telescopes. I can't guarantee whether this is for real or not. This is very much like if I write a piece of code and spread it on the internet, and then suddenly people start using that. And I mean, how many of you are aware of citizen science in general? How many of you are active participants in a project in citizen science where you will engage at least once a week or once a month? One, I see a hand or two hands. So keep that in mind when we kind of come to the very end, and we will also discuss maybe the definitions of citizen science. So this was a response that citizens responded to a big challenge. It was a national challenge. And we face these challenges all the time. So all of you have heard of Ebola. You know, we're all sitting here, we're safe right now. There is actually an Ebola crisis happening at this very moment. Anybody knows where the crisis is right now? I mean, you've all heard the Ebola crisis in West Africa that happened a couple years ago. Again, there is an Ebola crisis in Congo at this very moment, and it's uncontained and people are struggling. But one of the challenges is the soldiers of the pandemic side of the story and the new sets of challenges that we face are people like Alicia. She is in Liberia. She is a first responder that is heading out to a station where there is a reported case. There is no electricity, and she has a backpack. And that backpack is all you get when the sets of tools that you have to fight, I mean, I would say one of the most dangerous disease on our planet right now because there are very little solutions. So we are mostly thinking about organizations and individuals like Alicia. And actually, I find this quite fascinating that most often when I think of the human capital, the sets of warriors that we have out there that are fighting the sets of diseases. This is Alex. I met him in Uganda. He has more microbiology, 4 years of microbiology training. He got put in the field. Just an incredibly bright individual. And then when I asked him, where is your lab? He pointed out to those beds, mentioning that when I don't have patients on those beds, that's what I use as my lab. And this bothers me a lot. We have incredible talent all around the world, but lack of tools to be able to address these sets of problems that if we don't address at this point, our existence on this planet is actually debatable. So I'm going to now switch to a slightly more positive note, but I wanted to start this way so you know what I think about and what inspires me to start going. Okay, so here is the first, what do I mean by frugal science? So I'm going to come close to this young gentleman. What is your name? Sinad. So we're going to do something with Sinad that I don't know if Sinad will like or not, but we'll do it anyway. Here's a piece of Scotch tape. I'm going to peel it, and I want you to hear the sound that comes out of it. So if I come close, so you heard that sound, right? I just exposed you to X-rays. Literally, at this moment, you got exposed to X-rays because the moment I peel this tape, I'm going to do this again. And if you do this in a dark room when you go home tonight, you'll actually see a flash of light appearing right at that corner. So I'm just going to do this again. And of course, X-rays you can't see, and you shouldn't feel it because these are so little X-rays that most of the time when you're walking around and flying, there is plenty X-rays. And you've been peeling Scotch tape, I'm assuming, already. The reason I find this interesting is nobody in the world at this point can explain why X-rays come out of peeling Scotch tape. You know, we kind of consider ourselves as a civilization that can, you know, crack puzzles. Here is an uncracked puzzle, and it's remained uncracked for literally almost 70 years. It was first reported in 1940s. It's related to the phenomena of triboluminescence. How many of you have cracked mint in the dark? Yes, it flashes light. Fascinating phenomena. How can something like this generate X-rays? One of the things that I like about frugal science is you can take a phenomena that's right under your nose, And a physicist at UCLA actually thought about this and turned this into a portable X-ray machine. Quite literally, rather than high voltage that is required normally for X-rays, here's a mechanical source for X-rays that is literally can be used. And at this point, there is a company commercializing this. So a spark of an idea where you can suddenly change the cost of what an X-ray machine, or even your imagination for what this allows you to think about a conformal X-ray machine if you wanted to. It's a very different approach in terms of thinking about where to look for solutions. So what we're going to do today is walk through a few years of our lab's journey through many countries around the world, and I'll share a few sets of examples of what we've been working on. And I'm doing this in the context or hope that many of you would pick up, and literally the sets of toys that I'm going to talk about are things that you can build already to engage in this, the big sets of challenges that I talked about. Okay, so I'm going to use an example of malaria often enough. So everybody's heard of malaria. How many of you have lived in a place that has mosquitoes? We'll also talk about, wow, do you have mosquitoes in Livermore? Okay, so I have a task for all of you then. You know, ironically, the challenges are that many of these sets of diseases, when they're far away, you forget about them. Actually, malaria is rising in terms of number of people. That's roughly of the order of, you know, we have around 2 to 3 billion people around the world living in places where there is malaria. And, you know, there's roughly 500,000 deaths per year for malaria. But we have very little ways of detecting malaria. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today. But let's start with, here's the menu for today. I want to talk through a few sets of technologies. And so here's the first one. I was visiting Uganda, and one of the things that occurred at that time was I went to a clinic, and I walked out, and I noticed a pristine equipment that was being used as a doorstop. It's called a centrifuge. Anybody has used a centrifuge here? So most of you know, it just takes something and it'll spin it really, 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 really fast. Why do you do that? You do that because, you know, searching for diseases is like searching for a needle in a haystack. But if you could spin the whole haystack, the needle will come out on its own because of density changes. But there is no electricity in most places around the world where you need to do diagnostics. And I walked away asking this gentleman, why is it on this floor? He said, I haven't had electricity for 5 years. This piece of junk is better being used as a doorstop. And I really took that to heart, asking this question, could we do centrifugation without electricity? On the flight coming back, again, my mind wanders off quite a lot. I started thinking about toys. So here's the first quiz. How fast do you think a yo-yo spins? Okay. So this is a student in my lab named Dino. He happened to be a circus artist before joining the lab. He has an incredible yo-yo throw. If my throw was that good, I would have actually done a demo, but I can't throw a yo-yo. But I want to know, how fast do you think a yo-yo can spin when you throw it? Anybody who throws a yo-yo here? All right, so how fast do you think you can make it spin when you throw it? Any numbers you can toss. In rotations per minute. How many, 300 rotations per minute. That's a pretty good guess. Anybody else? 1,000. So the world record for the fastest spinning yo-yo is around 4,000, which is pretty cool. And Dino can get around 3,000 or so. But the last bits are really hard to get to. And actually, it's funny that another postdoc in my lab who joined, Scott Coyle, he couldn't throw fast yo-yos, but he could do tricks. And those tricks are no good for us for right now.
Saad, are you seeing this?
I am seeing but, you know, it was a hilarious moment because I didn't know Scott could do this. Wow. And then he joined the lab. We were working on yo-yos, and he's like, this is a fun lab I want to be. We started looking at all the toys that spin. And we stumbled upon this object, which I remember from my own childhood, which is called a button on a string. So how many of you have played with a button on a string? So if you look around the room, this will tell you the age of the people. Because, you know, the youngsters are with fidget spinners right now. And this thing is an incredibly powerful object for a very strange reason, actually. So very simple to do. You take a button, you put two holes, you put some string, and you play with it, and it spins. It spins quite fast. You can hear it. But this object happens to be the oldest toy that is known in the history of mankind. So when you look at archaeological surveys around the world, people have found this toy in every culture around the world. I just find this fascinating in terms of thinking about how people thought of this, for example. It was used as a musical instrument in the Greeks. It's used in many funerals and many places around the world for all kinds of strange reasons. We used to use them to cut each other's yo-yos, and that's not safe. You guys shouldn't do that. But you know, how is this possible that this is the oldest toy in the history of mankind, but nobody until last year actually asked this question, how does it work? And I want to understand how it works because I had an idea. I want to use it for something. This is how it works. So this is only the first equation in the talk. You write down, this is why mathematics is important. Because finally you can understand a toy, and here is the actual toy. You know, why writing this is, I mean, it took 8 months to write that equation, and it was important because then we could tune the parameters of this object. At this moment, I'm going to spin this thing, and I'm going to ask you how fast do you think this is spinning. So, and what's your name? Shurya. Shurya, can you hear a sound coming out of this? Yeah. Right? So how fast do you think this is spinning? 5,000. Any guesses? 5,000 RPM. Yeah, 10,000. So at this point, we hold the world record for fastest spinning object by human power, and this is around 125,000 RPM. So if you think about it, that's equivalent to 30,000 G-forces if you were experiencing, if you're a tiny little cell inside the spinning object. It's incredibly fast. The only reason we can do that is because we look at this equation, we optimize it to a point, and then we say, now we can actually do biochemistry out in the field. We can separate parasites out in the field with literally a piece of toy. This is exactly what we do. We call it paperfuge. It's made out of many types of materials. In 90 seconds, I asked them before if I can draw blood on stage. People usually are not comfortable with, so I'm not going to do that demo. But if you take a little lancet, and kids, you shouldn't do this at home. No, I really mean it. You should not do this at home because blood has all kinds of things. It has viruses. If you get cut accidentally, that's a different story. But for diagnosing, a little finger prick is the most common place that you start because many blood parasites. Some of you have heard of anemia, right? Roughly around 3 billion people need to be tested for anemia every year. Many pregnant women really do need to get tested for anemia. The way anemia is tested is I can take this, and now I can take a little capillary, put the blood, and if I spin it, you see half of it separated into white. That's called plasma. And the red part is your red blood cells. The ratio of red blood cells to the white portion, which is the plasma, is called a packed volume for the cell, and that tells you whether you have anemia or not. So literally in 90 seconds or so, anybody could do an anemia test. The other important part is many sets of diagnostic tools that are used actually require that white plasma to do the test itself. So here we now have a way to extract pure plasma. So it gets more interesting than that. If you did happen to have a parasite, you can spin it for a few more minutes, and literally we can pull out a single malaria parasite from a single blood cell. So this is fun because then we can go back, and now this is the village that I was talking about, 12 hours walking distance. And this happens to be the chief in the village. When we work out in the field, we have to get their permission before we can work. He's talking in Malagasy, that's being translated in French. French is being translated in English, so I can actually talk to him. Another important message to remember, I don't know if any of you noticed, and especially the women and the girls in the room, there is only one single woman in this room, and she's actually the only person allowed in this room because it's the meeting of the chief and their culture. She is the only teacher in the village and the community health worker. And it's an incredible backbone if you were to think about every time I travel, the number of community health workers that are actually women, and how they literally keep much of the healthcare system working. So, when you're thinking about empowering people, think of your role in the context of, even though you might be the first one and you might be the, it's incredibly important to really have that kind of engagement. So this is what a clinical trial looks like. We're testing this tool for malaria out in the field. So, if you've never done a clinical trial, this is how you would do it. Okay, so here's a fun thing. Why do we do this work? We do this work, we write papers. You wake up the next day and you think the world's going to change because I wrote a paper. Nothing changes. How many academics in this room? Okay, only very few. So they know what I'm talking about. Ironically, what's happening around the world now is because people have the capacity to replicate a piece of work. So when we posted this, hundreds of designs started to flow around. At this point, there are several different diagnostic tests that have been built independently on a platform like this. One that I'm most proud of is that there is a cell phone charger that somebody built using now the same mechanism, which I think I could use sometimes. Okay, so we're going to switch to another object. I'm going to kind of go a little bit faster here. We're going to talk about diagnostics a little bit. One of the challenges with diagnostics is you have to do chemistry out in the field. You have to manipulate molecules out in the field. That's hard. And again, sort of when I was starting to think about this, there are a lot of tools and technologies that are out there. Some of them are way too expensive and way too complicated, and other ones don't allow you the kind of flexibility. The best sets of diagnostic tools that actually are out there are similar to pregnancy tests, where water wicks in and then some chemistry happens, but it's very limited kinds of chemistries that you can do. We started thinking about, could you do the best of both worlds, and sort of my mind drifted again to yet another toy. So you see a theme here. This is an object that many of you might have played with, a music box, right? So you put a piece of tape in here and you turn this around. I forgot my tape. Otherwise, this is supposed to play Happy Birthday. I'm assuming everybody's played with this, right? There's something really remarkable about this object itself, because for you to hear a music at millisecond time scale, something is really being programmed. Historically, Mr. Jacquard, who invented the first Jacquard loom, was the first time we got programmable textiles, because otherwise making textiles was too hard. And I actually like the painting that you see there of Mr. Jacquard was made in silk by using 24,000 punch card tapes. This was a gift that his friends gave to him, 24,000. And when you zoom in that, this is the first evidence of a digital photograph or anything that is an image which is digital. Because when you look in, literally every one of this bit in this textile that has been woven is written by a punch card. So Charles Babbage, who literally invented the computers, the analytical engine, around that time in 1840 saw that textile. He got so inspired by it that he started thinking about, if they could do it for textiles, could he use mechanics and mechanical objects as computers? That was the origin of the history of computers. And literally, when he died in Turin, somebody found these cards. So any programmers in the room? So you should all recognize that object. That is the very first program that was ever written in the history of computer science on a piece of paper. And any of you who has actually used punch cards for programming? No, I want you to admit it, please. 1, 2, 3. So the young kids might never know this, and we don't have to tell them that. But programs were actually written on pieces of paper. If you admit it, then you're sort of admitting your age in some sense. We asked a very simple question. Can you program chemistry using pieces of paper? So we call this punch card programmable fluidics. Any of you who's interested in chemistry can take a tool like this and start doing chemistry. So this costs $5 to $10 for us to make. And what's fun about this is, again, after a lot of sets of processes, we essentially built a type of a tool that takes a program and it essentially runs chemical assays instead of manipulating bits. And since I'm going to run out of time soon, I'm just going to show you the actual result for this. For running a test for malaria, that's what the chip looks like. That's what the program looks like. You can modify it. You can change it just like you write code. You take a punch card and you punch a bit of holes. And in the end, you run it through a process, and literally all you get, if every one of these things is lighting up or not lighting up, that's a test for malaria. And this is actually all 5 species of malaria tested at the same time. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this to you, we're about to post this paper. This paper is not published yet, with all the instructions of how to buy a $10 music box from Amazon, hack it, use a 3D printer to make your chips, take a little puncher, make your program, and do any chemistry you want. Now, why is this interesting? It's interesting because biological chemistry, biochemistry, is very expensive when you do it in bulk. But when you do it in small volumes, it's actually cheap. You can run 1,000 reactions by doing it small. And of course, all the explosions that will happen in a small volume. So it's much safer to do chemistry this way. And then you might actually invent a new test, which is incredibly important, because then you have an avenue. You don't have to start from zero. You literally work on the things that are open as a problem. So we're testing this out in the field. OK, we're going to talk about mosquitoes, and I'm going to go a little bit faster now. So let's talk about Zika. So everybody's heard of Zika, I'm assuming? No? So Zika, amongst many things, it's another virus. One of the fascinating things that comes about is historically new diseases come in and go. And the challenge is, when last year Zika hit, I mean, of course, there are places in the US that you can get Zika. It's a very challenging disease because we don't actually understand its etiology. But one of the things is roughly around 40 countries were infected with Zika. And nobody knew which mosquito causes Zika, because Zika is caused, people believe, by biting mosquitoes. So the Brazilian army got involved because Brazil had the largest number of cases. And literally the whole army was searching for mosquitoes. 6 months the army was searching for mosquitoes. And I want you to guess, how many mosquitoes do you think they found when millions of people are infected that were infected with Zika? Because you have to have an infected mosquito before you can transmit it. So any numbers? 0. So here is a true entomologist talking. Actually, the answer is 4. But I'm amazed that you guessed that, because it's an incredibly hard problem. We have billions of mosquitoes per person that are around on this planet. So when you just go and pluck a few sets of mosquitoes, I mean, they looked in thousands and thousands of mosquitoes, but you're still undersampling. It's a huge challenge that we have drones flying around that can cause diseases, and nobody is paying attention. I mean, it's a really scary scenario in terms of as diseases grow. And again, if I give you a whole bunch of mosquitoes, how would you even know what those mosquitoes are? So if you think about this, there's roughly around 3,500 species of mosquitoes. And if I give you one, how do you know whether this one causes a disease or it doesn't cause a disease? So we started thinking about this problem. And one of the challenges I call it not the ice bucket challenge that you all know, but a mosquito bucket challenge. This is a real photograph. This is a person who has gone out there, collected a bucket of mosquitoes, and he's going to put every one of them, one at a time, under a microscope to identify it. And these are the kind of people that actually build our infrastructure for health. Like when you think about driving on a road, you need to know what species of mosquitoes are where, and the vector control units that are spread across counties all around the world do this kind of work to be able to tell you what's there. Now, this is tedious. Of course, it's very hard. It's very expensive. This is exactly how Ronald Ross actually discovered malaria in mosquito in India. And that was a long time ago. So how come our technologies are not, I mean, we're writing all these apps, which I'll talk about. Why are we not focusing them on problems that truly matter right now? You know, when you look at this as a challenge, you say, there's got to be something better. So here is what we came up with. I call it the Shazam of mosquitoes. Remember the time when a mosquito buzzes in your ear? It sounds like this buzz. If you don't like mosquito sounds, you might want to close your ears soon. It turns out mosquito flight has a signature for its species, so that buzz actually tells you what species it is. And there's a beautiful biological reason for it. So first of all, this is how people have been doing for the last 150 years surveillance. You sit there, you roll up your sleeves. So please don't do this. You roll up your sleeves and you wait for a mosquito to bite you. And the moment it bites, you just catch it. And then you pull it around, you actually look inside to see whether it's infected or not. This is not even ethical in terms of when you think about diseases like dengue, for example. So here's a little bit of an intermission. I know it's not in the middle, but I'll still call it an intermission. I want you to guess what am I playing. So it's mosquitoes, but let's listen more. This is a symphony of mosquitoes, exactly. I had to rally up 20 species of mosquitoes and told them to play music, and this is what it is. And you know, there's something very interesting about this sound. I mean, of course, I recorded them individually and I mixed them because I want you to use this as your ringtone for a couple of days. But the reason you can hear this is because different species have different notes. And that's the whole point, that from those notes you can actually identify those mosquitoes. So we took this idea and asked ourselves, the reason mosquitoes make these different sounds is they mate in flight. That's a female mosquito flying. The male is chasing, and the female is emitting a sound. The male is listening to it and testing and tuning to match the second harmonic for the female. And this is another good reason you should listen to the females. But it's important because of this, mosquitoes try to separate their frequencies because, of course, they have to know what species they are. Mosquitoes, they're not doing that by vision. We took this idea and we turned into what we call a buzz. Any of you can sign up for this citizen science project, taking literally a dumb phone, not a smartphone, something that I bought for $15, which we have 5 billion of on this planet. We recorded and made the world's largest acoustic database for mosquitoes. You record it, you upload it to our server, does a whole bunch of machine learning, and it actually tells us what species of mosquitoes are you handling. And if 0.0001% of people around the world did this, who care about diseases around their communities, we would have the world's largest map of mosquitoes in real time. So then when you see hotspots, you can actually engage the sets of communities and control to be able to control many of these diseases. So when we talk about diseases, you have to think about what lies on you as a responsibility as well, and at that same time, you'll be tackling an incredibly important problem. We have just turned the website on, and literally we get posts from around the world, communities mapping. This is from Madagascar. These are kids in Madagascar talking about recording mosquito sounds. And we're about to release an app, which I'm hoping many of you will try. Okay, so let's switch to microscopy. I am really running out of time, so I'm going to do something, or actually, let's just go fast. So I might skip some slides. Here are my favorite microscopes in the world. And I want you to observe them to see what comes to mind. My favorite is coming soon, I think. That's my favorite microscope. Microscopes have been around, but they're literally pieces of art and craft. If you had something like this, you would be, it's delicate, you're going to take care of it. And I started thinking about this, and because we work on life sciences problem, it's a very fundamental tool that I use every single day all the time. But when I'm in the field, it's the same set of a microscope that would cost between $10,000 to $100,000. And it didn't make sense to me that somebody whose entire year's income is only 5% of the cost of the microscope, then of course you're going to be scared. You're not going to use this as a tool. So of course for research, these sets of things are good, but we need a different approach to bring microscopy to people around the world. We invented what is called foldscope, which is literally a microscope folded out of a piece of paper. How many of you have actually heard of foldscope or used a foldscope? Okay, that's awesome. So I'm going to go a little bit faster here and then talk about what we need to do collectively together. It cost for anybody in this world to buy for $1.75, which is less than your cup of coffee. And this is the kind of imaging that you can do with this. Again, the reason the foldscope works is in that equation. We wrote down this equation for fat lens that allows us to understand how optics, what is the threshold for this type of a microscope. And for a price point of $1.75, you can do roughly around 700 nanometer resolution imaging. Now, what's interesting is, of course, you build it with your own hands. And that's my student right there, Jim, who graduated and then now actually heads an entity which we call Foldscope Instruments, which I'll talk a little bit about. This is the type of data that would come out of Foldscope. So literally, I don't know, anybody can identify what this is? I found this in my flower pot on my dinner table, which I hadn't paid a little attention to for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So there are beasts hidden around in your own backyards and on your dinner tables that you should pay attention to. Now, what's very interesting is we use this tool for lots of things in diagnostics, but I want to shift focus and I want to talk about something slightly different, which is when we started building these sets of tools, I thought that we were making scientific tools, and I didn't appreciate this 5 years ago, that we're actually building communities. And this is what I want to share. One of the things that starts to happen is then when we started building this tool, we started sharing them, and literally we had this thing on our lab website where, I'm going to come back to this. We published this paper. This paper was openly accessible, and then I woke up the next day, and as an academic, I felt the same thing again. Nothing has changed. So what is it good for? And on our website, we just wrote 2 sentences. Anybody in the world who would like to use this as a tool, we will ship it to you at our cost. We got something like, I was thinking we'll ship around 10,000 microscopes. We got 75,000 requests from around the world, 140 or so countries. We ended up shipping 50,000 of them from the lab. We built robots to build these. Those graduate students are not robots. The students built the robots that built the microscopes. But it was an incredible challenge. And as an academic, it's the biggest thing that I've ever done in my life, where I felt that it's important to do. Now we've actually scaled it even further. But something fascinating happened. What that did is created this, which is I call the Foldscope community. It happens to be, at this point, we have released something like 750,000 microscopes. It's the world's largest amateur microscopy community in the world, and we're about to cross around 1 million over the summer. And what's fascinating is I'll tell you just a few stories from people around the world for what they actually do with a tool like this. This is actually, just so for the kids in the audience, when you make something and it doesn't look shiny and perfect, this was my first Foldscope, 2011. Anybody recognize what that object is? It's a matchbox, and that was the moment of an idea, like lighting a matchbox. And literally, that's the evolution of the tool itself. And it's a very simple tool, but I've been working on this for the last 7 years or so. So it takes a long time to perfect. So anytime you're making something, think about what it's supposed to do. Dream about where it needs to go, not what it looks like in its current form. And stay true to your vision. It had to, when we built the Foldscope, it had to cost $1 or $2. That was a bound. If that didn't work, then we were not going to work on it. And again, that was the one reason we were able to come up with a technique like this to actually manufacture this. So I'm going to show you a quick set of videos of what you can do, and then we will transition into Q&As. This is what happens for the first time when you see the microscopic world. I don't know if you recognize. It might be trying to escape from the tape. This is the type of, this is actually a slum in Bombay. The tool doesn't require a cell phone, but it connects to a cell phone so you can connect data. Millions of kids around the world are not walking around with cell phones. I'm very happy that they're not walking around with cell phones. But you get to take microscopy out in your pocket wherever you are. And one of the phenomenal things about this is try to recognize some of these objects. So you already saw this. This happens to be a ciliate. And all of this is done in the field by people that are engaged in the program. Anybody recognizes what that is? Yeah? It's a diatom. Yes, it's a moving diatom. You know, what's fascinating is right in our backyards, on our dinner tables, of course in your kitchen sink, there are these incredible organisms that make you work. Of course in the bathroom for sure. This is what makes life work. You know, it's not us versus them. You have so many of these things living inside. If I was to take a piece of tape, this is again, I can say that you can do this at home. Take a piece of tape, put it around this area of the nose, keep it there for say 15-20 minutes, and then peel it off. Peel it off like that and look at it under a microscope. You will find an insect that lives on each one of us, our faces. It's called a face mite. And all of you have it, no matter how much you wash your face. This is an object that evolved with us. It lives in our spores. Nobody knows its function. This is when I got some poison oak. You know, you observe yourself and your thinking starts changing for how this world actually works. It's extremely important. You can read as many books as you want. It's not going to give you the kind of perspective for how many open problems and how wonderful and bizarre this world is. So it's extremely important to actually experience. There was a question. We don't know. We don't know its function. We don't know it has been studied very little. All we know is all of us have it. That's all we know. We believe that in the night when you go to sleep, the face mite comes out and crawls around and goes back in. No, this is, I'm sorry, but it's, you would want to know or you would want to not know. It's there, but you could catch it, you could see it, and many people in the community did that. So who are these people? So one of the things that we do is we ask everybody who's working with a tool like this to document what they do. And this amateur microscopy community, if you go to this website, there are thousands and thousands of examples. It's completely open-ended in what people actually do. This is something very interesting in terms of as you build communities, something very interesting happens in the community, which is they become exponential, which is what this looks like right now. This is where it's distributed. This is a very old map. I'm just going to show you a few pictures associated. Actually, let me just show one or two examples of, yeah, okay, let's just end with this video. So you're going to watch the people engaged. So this is in the northeast in Kaziranga. It's one of the last places for the Indian rhinos. This is the first time I ran a workshop for rangers that put their life on the line to protect many of the animals. And they literally had to put their guns aside to play with a microscope. This is sandflies. This is what causes leishmaniasis. You can literally detect this by just looking under a microscope. You take a ladybug, you can watch blood circulation inside its own body. This is where ants come from. I don't know if you have ants in your home or not. Another one of those sets of diatoms. This is Madagascar. You know, we have a massive program in Madagascar. And one of the kids came up with an idea to look at his own life, which I just got actually recently. And I documented the whole process with my kids. And we made the first videos for the embryonic origin of human life, which is on the Foldscope website. Kenya, Nigeria, this is a massive community. One of the most powerful things about this community is literally they all have the same tool. So what changes is their creativity. Now this is in India. We have a big program in India with the Indian government with the goal of bringing this to every single kid. This is my favorite example. This is a Syrian refugee camp 5 miles in Lebanon from the Syrian border. The kids have not gone to school for the last 10 years. And this is an entire generation. And literally, I mean, the fact that they have a capacity to smile and move on with something like that. It's just incredibly powerful. You know, this is schools around the United States, and one of the things that we deeply care is it's an open letter. When we engage with people, they get to do whatever they want to do with a tool like this. Okay, so any of you who speaks interesting languages, I would love for you to translate these. We've translated them in around 25 or so different languages. Many of them are Indian languages, but if you care about bringing this to your community, I would love for you to translate this. Maybe I'm going to end with this as an example. Okay, so you know, you're thinking about all of this and saying, you know, what is your role? Why did I come all this way to tell you this? Now, this is the only message that I have for you. Around, you know, 6 years ago or so, when we started this project, I got this email from a gentleman named Mo Pandirajan. He lives in the south of India, in a fairly rural place. And he said, oh, I run a small school of 12 kids. Could you send me some microscopes? And he wrote it in Tamil. I don't speak Tamil. Google Translate came to the rescue. I responded. I sent him around 100 Foldscope. I kept getting these emails, and I was like, okay, I'll keep sending microscopes. 5 years later, I got an email that had an Excel sheet attached, which had a list of 12,000 names of teachers and roughly around 55,000 entries for kids. And when I translated this email, he said, oh, thank you so much for supporting me. Over these last couple of years, I've trained 12,000 teachers all across South India. And you know, when you get an email like that, it's like, no, that's not possible. I mean, 12,000. So this happens to be Mo essentially quit, or didn't quit because he was still running a school, traveled around the world. I didn't believe him first, so I joined and became Facebook friends with him, which is what you do. And I spied on him, and I saw every single day Mo was traveling around rural areas around the country, urban areas, running Foldscope workshops for kids between 30 to 40 kids, and I did the math, and it actually checks out. It's incredible and remarkable, you know, from my perspective, when I see an impact of people like him, and we have hundreds of people like him in the community now, but I would have never found the Mo. And one of the things that I find fascinating is he took the ownership. At this point, after English, Tamil is the most spoken language in our community. And that's primarily because of a single person who decided to do something like this. And I find this remarkable because in the end, he could have just thought about, oh, I got some microscopes for the kids that I care about, but he took the next step, which is, you know, we can make microscopes. I cannot manufacture mentors. And again, you know, the vision that we have is if every single kid in the world is walking around with a microscope in their pocket, what would it look like? But it would not be possible without something where mentors are actually engaged. So we can make as many microscopes as we want. We cannot manufacture mentors. And so the mentors are in this room right now. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking about this, you have an open invitation to take this project in any direction you care about. Choose any community you care about. Literally at this price point, you can have any number of tools, engage your partners. And you know, one of the things that I personally love about this is to be able to engage with these mentors. At this point, you can go on the site. While I spoke for a little longer than an hour, there must have been hundreds of posts on our community site. And after this, I'm going to go and I'm going to write. I used to be able to write to every one of them. Now that's not possible. There's way too much flux. And I'll end with this picture. I love this picture because, you know, you kids are out here. I love this picture because the parents in this picture are not sharing their microscope with their kid. And there is a lesson there, which is if we all become kids, it's going to be all right. You know, the kids see us and they say, what do we enjoy? They're going to enjoy the same sets of things. So if you're thinking about science, if you're thinking about science for the kids in your life, you have to become a kid. If you don't do that, then you are not sharing the same set of passion that made you who you are. Thank you very much.
What a great talk. I'm like, the reason we put these kinds of events together is we only have one mission, and vision is, you know, as Dr. Manu Prakash has said, there is so much is happening around, world is changing, and we definitely cannot prepare future for you guys. So the only thing which we have in our hand is to prepare our children so they're ready for tomorrow. So with this, I'd like to call upon Regina Brinker, who is Livermore Valley Joint Unified School District STEM teacher, and she actually reach out each and every teacher and the students in the Livermore schools, and all those students have reached out to her the questions. So Regina, here you go.
Can I disconnect that? You don't need it.
Dr. Prakash, thank you very much for your inspiring talk. I have three questions from students that I'd like to share and then open the stage up to other questions. This question is from Allison, a sixth grader at Junction. I don't know if she's...
Is Allison here?
Is Allison here? No,
Where are you, Allison? Oh.
I'll relay the message. Allison asked, what motivated you to become the kind of inventor you are today?
I think it's, I grew up in India, and I see the world as one connected place. And I think sometimes around in our surroundings, we often forget the broader picture. So I think personally for me, it's very important that the privilege that I have, I have all the toys in my lab. I have a microscope that costs $1 million, and I can use that as much as I want. But it'll never translate into something where a kid in the middle of nowhere is experiencing the same kind of joy that I experience. So when I started my lab, it was very, very clear to me that we wanted to do this. We still do very basic science, but it was very important. As scientists, it's almost it's a necessity that we share our passion for science with people. So I think, to me, this was not a very, I love toys, so that's another part of why I do what I do. It's not a discrete decision that you make to become an inventor. You make tools for yourself. And then I was making these tools, and it happens to be useful for other people.
Thank you. The next question comes from Jeannie, who is a senior at Livermore High School. She was volunteering this morning. I'm not sure she made it here, but she's going to be majoring in biomedical engineering next year. And her question is, how difficult is it to build your ideas?
Everybody who works with ideas knows how difficult it is. Okay, let me flip this around and say something interesting. You have to ask yourself, why do you care about what you care about? So if you don't listen to your inner voice, and then whatever you're working on will seem difficult. It doesn't also have to be. I think this is something, let me mention this, which is something that bothers me most often. It's not about coming up with an idea that will immediately change the world or you'll cure some big disease. You have to do science for yourself first. If you don't do science for yourself, if you don't find joy internally, then you don't, science is much like a marathon. So you're not running a sprint. And if it's in a marathon, marathon already when you're starting is hard, but you're also getting an enjoyment out of it at the very day, every single day. And so most often, I don't think too much about failure for ideas. And again, ideas are very cheap. They come all the time. The big thing is, can you pursue something long enough that you do believe in it, which requires you to passionately care about whatever you're working on. So, science, on some sense, you can say is very hard, and on the other hand, you could say, you just go and do things every single day, and that makes it very easy. But you don't have to think about the outcome, frankly, on an every single day basis. You can take a step back after a couple of months to say, okay, where did I get? I should evaluate my strategies. But you're not trying to say, I'm going to crack this problem today. Every single thing I talked about, we've been, as a group, working on that for many, many years, and still we have a long way to go.
Do you want to see if there are questions from the audience?
Yes, questions. Thank you so much for staying this long. Right there. Actually, let's start with kids. We'll start with the youngest. Yes. Can you say your name as well? Abby.
Yeah. Where can I get that ringtone that was made out of that?
Say that again. What? The ringtone? Oh, yes. It's on abuzz.stanford.edu. Okay. Just search abuzz ringtone. And what I love about this is I know your friends are going to ask you what it is, and you'll be able to actually explain to them why mosquitoes are important. So other questions? We will start with kids first. You can ask anything you care about. Yes? Say that again?
Are you guys selling foldscopes?
That's correct. Foldscopes are accessible. And actually, this is another important aspect of how to scale. There are many sets of technologies that we just post on the website. So similarly, you can build your own foldscope. All the instructions are online. But at that same time, we make this kind of a lens, which is very hard to make at home. So you can also just get a foldscope on foldscope.com. And one of the things that we do in the community is I want you to not just use it. You can take an X-Acto knife or a scissor if you are an appropriate age and hack it, change it, and share what you did on the community itself. So you should think of it, and again, it costs $2. So literally, you have a chance that you don't have to worry about it breaking or anything, and it takes time to become an observer. So what's most important is, I mean, this tool is interesting, but what's more interesting is what you will do with it. And that takes a long time. I mean, it's almost, I often describe this as a pencil for microscopy. So just like you carry a pencil around, and when you have an idea, you open up your pencil and you write something down. Similarly for me, when I have an idea, I don't draw a pencil, I pull out my microscope and I see what I'm thinking about. Yeah, so the community website is called microcosmos.foldscope.com. And then the site is called foldscope.com. Other questions? Are we going to run out of time?
Yes.
What I'm going to do is I talked about all these things. We're going to take a question there and then we'll call it a day. But I didn't get to actually show you. And what is the point if I talked about all this and I said it was about experience? So I'm going to be here for a couple of hours at one of the booths outside. If you all come simultaneously, then I don't know what I'm going to do. But if you come in batches and things like that, we can fold a few foldscopes, but more fun. We can walk around. So if you come to the booth, bring something with you that you have wondered about what it looks like. And then if you bring fun samples, you get to walk away. If you fold a foldscope, you get to take a foldscope. I don't have that many, but at that same time, we'll spend some time at the booth itself because I couldn't do demos. We didn't have the time. Last question. Yes? Why are there bugs? Oh, Jesus. This is going to be an hour-long answer. So bugs, I could think of it in two ways. Bugs is sometimes also used for small things, and bugs are also used for insects. Let's think about insects for a little bit. You know, they get this bad reputation that, oh, you know, insects and sometimes I have very young kids right now, so they don't have this, but earlier stages I often see this, and again, I see this in my mom and many grown-ups, that, you know, you put an insect in their hand and they jump out. I don't understand it. Insects are incredibly beautiful. They're incredible machines that are shrunk. They learn how to fly. There are ants out there that actually without wings can fly. There are insects that can drill through a tree. There are insects that live and sleep under the ground for 18 years. And our survival for at least all of pollination and many of the ecosystems depend on insects. So it's a really fun, it's an analogy where on one hand we think about, you know, why are they there and what are they doing? And they're probably asking the same question, why are we here and what are we doing? And the thing that you should try to do is the bug that you hate the most, choose whatever it is. It could be a mosquito, it could be a cockroach. Trust me, spend half an hour with that bug. Put it in a cup and just watch it. Just watch. No microscope, nothing. Take a cockroach, put it in a box, and see what it does. Just fold your hands and watch how it turns. See how it bumps into the edge and then turns to the right and goes. It's seeking a way out. Put something dark in there, see how it goes to sleep. You'll find an incredible complexity and a reflection of life that you would never have understood otherwise. Some of the bugs are the most powerful tools. If you care about medicine, fruit flies that are bugs are one of the lifesavers because many of the drugs and ideas are first tested, not just as test case, but even the biology, the most biology we know is because of this insect named fruit flies. So when you have fruit flies and you find it a little annoying, just thank it before you swat it, okay? I really mean it, thank it, because that is where most of the major biomedical discoveries are being made. They're being made in fruit flies. Okay, I couldn't answer that question. That was a tough one, so I diverted it. But thank you so much. I'll be outside.
Yeah.